trigger warning that I will be talking about intimate partner violence and domestic violence in this episode and various forms that it can take. Hashtag why I stayed, because after being stuck in an abusive relationship for a while, I started to believe I deserved all of it. This week on Stuff Mom Never Told You. Well, on Monday I kicked things off with men can get pregnant too, or Kristen learns a lesson in avoiding cisnormativity when talking about reproductive rights. On Wednesday I answered a question a lot of you had about where the dumb blonde stereotype comes from. And on Friday I asked whether this whole basic bitch thing is sexist. Now on to Ask Kristen. First of all, thanks to everybody who watched and commented on last week's Ask Kristen video. Why don't guys compliment guys? On the one hand, Facundo Corradini says, we do all the time. At least here in Argentina, we compliment our male friends just as we do with our female friends. Wonderful, Argentina. On the other hand, Yuri Vilas Boas said, after I thought about the matter some time, I realized that no, I didn't compliment men, and that's exactly why. I didn't want to seem gay. Since I also realized there's absolutely nothing wrong with being gay, I started making efforts to compliment men. Now to this week's Ask Kristen question from Christiane Williams. Why do people stay in abusive relationships? As probably any of us who have fallen in love, gotten a hardcore crush, been in a long-term relationship can attest, shutting off all those feelings and walking away and never looking back is not so simple. I personally have stayed in not outright abusive relationships, but relationships that were not good or healthy for me, with people who were not good or healthy for me for way longer than I should have. There's a commonly cited statistic that it takes someone 7 times leaving an abusive relationship before they finally go for good. A lot of it is fueled by something referred to as the cycle of abuse. So it starts out with an incident of abuse, which is a power play to show the other person in the relationship that you are the boss, you are in control not only of the relationship but also of that person. There might be a period of guilt in which the abuser is guilty for his or her actions, not so much because they're uncomfortable with what they've done, but rather guilty at the prospect of being caught. In order to assuage that guilt, the abuser tends to start looking for excuses, pinpointing all of the wrong things that the other person did to bring on that abuse. Then a period of normalcy tends to set in, where the abuser might go out of his or her way to be extra kind and sweet. This is often referred to as a honeymoon phase, where the person who has been the target of abuse might think, oh, this is stopping, he or she has changed. Soon enough, the abuser then enters into a phase of fantasy and planning, of imagining abusing yet again and looking for excuses and reasons. Then comes the setup, the thing that the abuser is waiting for to happen to trigger the abuse. Then the cycle begins anew. There's also an isolation factor. The person in the relationship might not leave because he or she doesn't feel like they have anywhere else to go. Another big factor that keeps people in abusive relationships, especially if there are children involved, is the risk of poverty and homelessness. One facet of domestic or intimate partner violence is economic abuse, wherein the abuser restricts the victim's access to money, possibly to getting a job, certainly to getting credit cards. Even if that person has a job, the abuser will often interfere with their day-to-day work life, especially if they attempt leaving. If they choose to leave, when that happens, they often have to immediately take time off of work to relocate, to go to court, to coordinate with law enforcement officers. For more specifics on why people stay in abusive relationships, I highly recommend you look up the Twitter hashtag #WhyIStayed. This hashtag was started to highlight how leaving an abusive relationship is often the exception rather than the rule. Hashtag #WhyIStayed, because he never hit me and I didn't think verbal abuse and emotional manipulation was considered an abusive relationship. Hashtag #WhyIStayed, because I was 15 and he said he loved me and I didn't know what love was. Hashtag #WhyIStayed. He said he would change. He promised it was the last time. I believed him. He lied. Why is this happening? Even though more than 1 in 3 and 1 in 5 men, at least just in the United States, will experience some form of intimate intimate partner violence. We only talk about it after the fact. It's usually such a reactive conversation. It's not proactive in the sense of us actually taking the time to fully understand relationship violence and domestic violence and the many different forms that it can take. And also doing our due diligence to talk to teens about dating violence as well. This starts when we are young. Women between the ages of 20 and 24 are at highest risk of domestic violence. It's time that we start more proactive conversations on domestic violence to stem this epidemic. The solution requires all of us. Now I want to hear from you. Do you have any advice or experience getting out of abusive relationships or spotting those red flags? And if you have any tips on what to do if a friend or a loved one is in an abusive relationship and you maybe want to help them get out of that, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to message me privately, absolutely. You can email me at stuffmomnevertoldyou@gmail.com. Take care of yourself and take care of others too.